The grease-slicked water stung Zara Langford's cracked hands as she scrubbed the 100th plate of the evening, her stomach growling so loudly she feared the saloon patrons in the next room might hear it over their drunken laughter. She had been washing dishes in the back room of Magenti's saloon in Abiquiu, New Mexico territory, for 3 months now, working 12-hour days for barely enough coins to rent a corner of a storage room and afford one meal every other day. The summer of 1878 had been brutally hot, and the cramped kitchen space felt like working inside a furnace. Sweat dripped down her temples, mixing with the dishwater as she worked through the endless mountain of dirty plates, glasses, and silverware. Her dress, once a respectable blue cotton, had faded to a grayish color from too many washings and too much wear. At 22 years old, Zara had imagined a different life for herself, but circumstances had a way of crushing dreams beneath their heavy boots. "Move faster, girl," barked Magenti, the saloon owner, as he burst through the kitchen door carrying another tray laden with dirty dishes. He was a thick-necked man with a perpetually red face and breath that reeked of whiskey. "I got customers waiting for clean plates, and you are acting like you got all the time in the world." Zara bit back a sharp retort and simply nodded, her hands moving faster through the scalding water. She had learned quickly that talking back to Magenti only resulted in reduced pay or threats of dismissal. In a town like Abiquiu, jobs for single women were scarce, and most of them were far worse than washing dishes. She had seen what happened to desperate women in frontier towns, and she was determined not to fall into that particular trap. The kitchen door swung open again, and this time, a different figure filled the doorway. Zara glanced up briefly and saw a tall man in dusty riding clothes, his broad-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. He was not Magenti, which immediately made him more interesting than most of the people she encountered in this miserable place. "Magenti around?" the man asked, his voice deep and measured, carrying an authority that commanded attention without demanding it. "He just left through that door," Zara replied, gesturing with one dripping hand toward the saloon proper. "Should be out front somewhere." The man nodded but did not immediately leave. Instead, he stood there for a moment and Zara felt his gaze on her. She kept her eyes on the dishes, uncomfortable with the attention. Men who stared usually wanted something and she had nothing to give. "You work here?" he asked. "Obviously," Zara said, a bit more sharply than she intended. Exhaustion and hunger had worn away her ability to maintain polite conversation. "How long have you been washing dishes today?" The question surprised her enough that she looked up properly for the first time. The man had removed his hat, revealing dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey. His face was weathered but handsome in that rugged way common to men who spent their lives outdoors. He appeared to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, with a strong jaw and a serious expression that suggested he did not waste time on frivolous matters. "Since dawn," she admitted, not sure why she was answering him. "Why does it matter to you?" "It is nearly 9 o'clock at night," he observed. "That is over 12 hours. 13, actually," Zara corrected. "And I still have another 2 hours of work before Magenti will let me leave. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to finish these dishes or he will dock my pay." The man studied her for another long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he placed his hat back on his head and nodded once before disappearing through the door. Zara returned her attention to the dishes, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her chest. She had no time for handsome strangers with penetrating gazes and questions about her working hours. An hour later, Magenti burst back into the kitchen, his face even redder than usual. "You, girl, get out here, now," Zara's heart sank. Had she done something wrong? Was he finally going to fire her? She dried her hands on her already damp apron and followed Maginty into the main saloon area, where the stranger from earlier sat at a table with a glass of whiskey in front of him. "This man says he wants to hire you," Maginty spat, clearly unhappy about the situation. "Says he will pay me for the inconvenience of losing a dishwasher." Zara looked between Maginty and the stranger, confused. "Hire me? For what?" The stranger stood, his full height impressive in the low-ceilinged saloon. "My name is Nathan Naylor. I own a ranch about 10 miles north of here. I am in need of a cook, and I am prepared to offer you room, board, and fair wages for the work." "She is a dishwasher, not a cook," Maginty interjected, but Nathan held up a hand. "Can you cook?" he asked Zara directly. Zara's mind raced. Could she cook? She had cooked for her family back in Kansas before everything fell apart, before her parents died of fever and her brother disappeared into the wilderness, leaving her alone and destitute. She had cooked Sunday dinners and birthday cakes, soups and stews and fresh bread. But that had been years ago in a different life. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I can cook." "Then the job is yours if you want it. I have 10 ranch hands who need feeding 3 times a day. You will have your own quarters, separate from the bunkhouse. Clean accommodations, access to the kitchen whenever you need it, and $30 a month plus food." $30 a month. Zara almost gasped. Maginty paid her $8 a month, and half of that went to renting her miserable corner of the storage room. $30 was more money than she had seen in years. "Why?" she asked suspiciously. "Why would you offer a job to someone you do not even know?" Nathan met her gaze steadily. "Because I watched you work for 10 minutes, and I saw someone who does not quit even when the task is thankless and the conditions are poor. That is the kind of person I want working for me. Besides, my current cook just quit to go prospect for gold in California, and my men are about to mutiny if they have to eat my cooking for another week." Despite herself, Zara felt the corner of her mouth twitch in what might have been a smile. "When would I start?" "Tonight, if you are willing. I have a wagon outside. You can collect whatever belongings you have, and we will head to the ranch." Maginty sputtered protests about proper notice and compensation, but Nathan silenced him by dropping a handful of coins on the table. "That should more than cover any inconvenience." Zara did not give herself time to second-guess the decision. She rushed back to the storage room, gathered her few possessions, 2 extra dresses, a hairbrush, a small Bible that had been her mother's, and a locket containing a faded photograph of her family, and stuffed them into a worn carpet bag. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and excitement. She was leaving this horrible place, taking a chance on something unknown, and for the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. The night air felt blessedly cool after the suffocating heat of the saloon kitchen. Nathan helped her up onto the wagon bench with surprising gentleness, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The 2 horses started forward at his command, and Abiquiu fell away behind them as they headed north into the darkness. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon wheels, the clip-clop of hooves, and the distant howl of a coyote. The moon hung low and full in the sky, bathing the landscape in silvery light. The air smelled of sage and dust and possibility. "Thank you," Zara finally said, breaking the silence. "I do not know why you did this, but thank you." "Everyone deserves a chance at something better," Nathan replied, his eyes on the road ahead. "You looked like you needed one. What if I am a terrible cook?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, voicing the fear that had been building since she accepted his offer. For the first time, she heard him laugh, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "Then I suppose my ranch hands and I will get very skinny very quickly. But somehow, I doubt that will be the case. You have a lot of faith in a stranger. Sometimes faith is all we have, he said, and something in his tone suggested he spoke from experience. They arrived at the ranch as midnight approached. Even in the darkness, Zara could make out the sprawling layout of the property: a main house, a long bunkhouse, several barns and outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Nathan guided the wagon to a stop near a small building set apart from the others. "This is the cook's quarters," he explained, jumping down and offering his hand to help her descend. "The previous cook made some improvements before he left. You should find it comfortable enough." He lit a lantern hanging by the door, and warm light spilled into a cozy single-room cabin. It was simple but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts, a dresser, a small table with 2 chairs, a wash basin, and even a wood stove in the corner for heat during cold nights. Compared to the storage room corner she had been living in, it looked like a palace. "The main kitchen is in the big house," Nathan continued. "I will show you everything in the morning. For now, get some rest. Breakfast is usually at 6, but tomorrow I will push it to 7 to give you time to settle in and take stock of what you have to work with." He set the lantern on the table and moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Langford, Zara," she said. "Just call me Zara." "Zara, then. Welcome to the Naylor Ranch. I hope you will find it suits you better than washing dishes at Maginty's." After he left, Zara sat on the edge of the real her bed and tried to process the whirlwind of the past few hours. She had gone from washing dishes in a greasy saloon to being employed as a cook on what appeared to be a prosperous ranch. It seemed too good to be true, and experience had taught her that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. But as she lay down on the comfortable mattress and pulled the clean quilts over herself, she decided to embrace this stroke of good fortune, however temporary it might prove to be. Tomorrow she would worry about proving herself as a cook. Tonight, she would simply rest. Dawn came too quickly, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of pink and gold. Zara woke to the sound of roosters crowing and men's voices calling to one another as the ranch came to life. She dressed quickly in her least worn dress, brushed and pinned her dark hair into a practical bun, and made her way to the main house. The kitchen proved to be larger and better equipped than she had dared hope. A massive cast iron stove dominated one wall, with ample counter space, hanging pots and pans, and shelves stocked with staples. A large table in the center of the room provided workspace, and windows on 2 sides let in plenty of natural light. This was not just a kitchen, it was a proper working space where someone could create real meals. Zara found flour, salt, baking powder, eggs, bacon, potatoes, and dried beans. She also discovered a cold storage area with fresh milk and butter. Her mind began working through possibilities. Biscuits, definitely. Bacon and fried potatoes. Coffee, strong and hot. Maybe a gravy if she could manage it. Nothing fancy, but substantial food to fuel men who would spend the day doing hard physical labor. She got to work, her hands remembering skills she had not used in years. The biscuit dough came together smoothly, the bacon sizzled perfectly in the pan, and the potatoes fried up golden and crispy. She made a big pot of coffee and set the table in the adjoining dining room for what she hoped would be enough places. Nathan arrived first, promptly at 7, followed by a steady stream of ranch hands. They were a varied bunch, young and old, weathered and fresh-faced, but all with the lean, muscular build of men who worked from sunup to sundown. They filed in with curious glances at the new cook, then settled at the table with the quiet efficiency of hungry men facing a meal. Zara served the food, her nerves making her hands tremble slightly. This was the test. If they hated her cooking, she would be back to washing dishes or worse. The men loaded their plates and began eating, and for several long moments, the only sound was the scrape of forks against plates. Then one of the older ranch hands, a grizzled man with a gray beard, looked up and said, "Lord Almighty, these are the best biscuits I have had since my mama died." A murmur of agreement went around the table. Another man praised the potatoes. A young hand with red hair and freckles asked if there were more biscuits. Nathan, who had been eating quietly at the head of the table, caught her eye and gave her a small nod of approval. Zara felt tension she had not realized she was carrying drain from her shoulders. She could do this. She could actually do this job. Over the following weeks, Zara settled into a rhythm at the ranch. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, spent the morning preparing the noon meal, used the afternoon to plan and prep for dinner, and fell into bed exhausted each night. It was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way that washing dishes never had been. She was creating something, feeding people who appreciated her efforts, and for the first time in years she felt valued. The ranch hands were respectful, keeping their distance but always quick with a thank you or a compliment about the food. Zara learned their names and preferences. Old Tom liked extra gravy on everything. Red, the young one, would eat 6 biscuits at breakfast if she let him. Miguel, who had worked for the Naylor family for 20 years, preferred his coffee strong enough to dissolve a horseshoe. She adjusted her cooking to accommodate them, and they responded with fierce loyalty. Nathan himself remained something of a mystery. He was polite and professional, checking in with her regularly to ensure she had everything she needed and that the men were treating her respectfully. He sometimes stayed after meals to help carry dishes back to the kitchen, despite her protests that it was not necessary. During these brief interactions, she learned small details about him: that he had inherited the ranch from his father 3 years ago, that he took pride in treating his workers fairly, that he had built the operation from a struggling outfit into one of the most successful ranches in the territory. One evening in late September, as Zara was finishing the cleanup after dinner, Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway. This was unusual enough that she paused in her work, a soapy plate still in her hands. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Not at all. I wondered if you might have a moment to talk." Zara dried her hands and nodded, curious about what required a formal conversation. Nathan pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and gestured for her to sit, then took a seat across from her. "You have been here almost 2 months now," he began. "The men are happier and more productive than they have been in a long time, and that is directly because of your cooking. You have exceeded my expectations in every way." "Thank you," Zara said, pleased but also wary. In her experience, compliments often preceded bad news. "I wanted to increase your wages to $40 a month, effective immediately. You have earned it." The unexpected generosity left her momentarily speechless. "That is very kind, but not necessary. You are already paying me more than fairly." "I pay people what they are worth, and you are worth $40 a month." His tone left no room for argument. Then he hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. "There is something else. Twice a month I go into Santa Fe for supplies and business. I was wondering if you might like to accompany me next week. You could purchase any special ingredients you want for the kitchen, or fabric if you need new dresses, or anything else you might want for yourself." The offer surprised her. She had barely left the ranch since arriving, focused entirely on proving herself through her work. The thought of a trip to Santa Fe, of seeing a real city, of having the freedom to shop for things she wanted rather than just needed, felt almost decadent. "I would like that very much," she admitted. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes that made him look younger. "Good. We will leave at dawn next Thursday. The trip takes most of the day, so we will stay overnight at a hotel and return Friday." After he left, Zara sat in the quiet kitchen and tried to understand the strange feeling in her chest. It was not just gratitude, though she was grateful. It was not just relief at her improved circumstances, though she was relieved. There was something else, something that made her heart beat faster when Nathan entered a room, something that made her pay extra attention to the meals she prepared, hoping to see that flash of approval in his eyes. She was developing feelings for her employer, and that was a complication she had not anticipated. The journey to Santa Fe was everything Zara had hoped for and more. The landscape changed as they traveled, from the dusty plains around Abiquiu to the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, with their distinctive reddish peaks. Nathan proved to be an easy companion, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the region. He told her about the pueblos that had existed in the area for centuries before Spanish colonists arrived, about the trade routes that once connected Santa Fe to Mexico and the eastern United States, about the changes the railroad would bring when it finally reached New Mexico territory. Zara found herself talking more than she had in months, sharing stories from her childhood in Kansas, carefully edited versions of how she ended up alone and destitute in Abiquiu, and her dreams of someday having her own restaurant. That last confession slipped out before she could stop it, and she immediately felt foolish for admitting such an unrealistic ambition. But Nathan did not laugh or dismiss her dream. Instead, he said, "I think you would run an excellent restaurant. You have the skill and the dedication it would take." "It is just a dream," she said, uncomfortable with how much his words meant to her. "I am content with where I am." "Dreams are not foolish, Zara. They are what keep us moving forward, even when the road is hard." They reached Santa Fe in late afternoon, and Nathan secured rooms at a respectable hotel before taking her to a large mercantile that seemed to stock everything imaginable. He gave her a generous budget and told her to take her time selecting whatever she wanted. Zara wandered the aisles in wonder, running her fingers over bolts of fabric, examining spices she had not cooked with in years, and discovering luxuries like vanilla extract and chocolate. She purchased flour and sugar in bulk, dried fruits, cinnamon and nutmeg, a new set of sharp knives, and yes, enough fabric to make 2 new dresses. Nathan insisted on buying her a warm wool coat for the coming winter and a pair of sturdy new boots to replace her worn ones. She tried to protest the extravagance, but he simply said, "Consider it part of your compensation. You cannot cook properly if you are cold or if your feet hurt." That evening, Nathan took her to dinner at one of Santa Fe's nicest restaurants. Zara felt self-conscious in her old dress, even though it was the best one she owned, but Nathan seemed not to notice. He ordered wine with dinner, and they talked for hours about everything and nothing. She learned that he had never married, too focused on building the ranch to pursue romance. He confessed to sometimes feeling lonely despite being surrounded by ranch hands all day. She admitted that she had thought about leaving the West entirely, going back east where there might be more opportunities for women, but something had kept her in New Mexico territory. "I am glad you stayed," Nathan said quietly, his amber eyes intense in the candlelight. "The ranch is better with you there. I am better with you there." Zara's breath caught. This felt like more than an employer expressing satisfaction with an employee. This felt personal, intimate, dangerous. She knew she should pull back, maintain proper boundaries, but she could not bring herself to do it. "I am glad I stayed too," she whispered. They walked back to the hotel through streets lit by gas lamps, their shoulders occasionally brushing. Nathan escorted her to her room and hesitated outside the door, as if wanting to say something more. Finally, he simply wished her good night and retreated to his own room down the hall. Zara lay awake for a long time, her mind churning with new feelings and possibilities. She was falling in love with Nathan Naylor, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. What if he did not feel the same way? What if this jeopardized her position at the ranch? What if she was misreading his kindness for something more? The return journey on Friday seemed to pass too quickly. Back at the ranch, they fell into their usual roles: employer and cook, rancher and employee, but something fundamental had shifted between them. Zara caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking. She found herself lingering after meals, hoping he would stay to talk. The air between them felt charged with unspoken words and suppressed feelings. October brought cooler weather and the first hints of the coming winter. Zara threw herself into her work, developing new recipes and preserving food for the lean months ahead. She made jams and pickles, dried herbs, and stored root vegetables in the cold cellar. The ranch hands praised every meal, and Nathan never failed to thank her, though his thanks now came with lingering looks that made her pulse race. One crisp morning in early November, Zara was kneading bread dough when Nathan appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual. He looked agitated, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of inner turmoil. "Is everything all right?" she asked, concerned. "I need to ask you something," he said abruptly, "and I need you to be completely honest with me." Alarm shot through her. Had she done something wrong? Was he about to let her go? "What is it?" Nathan moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. "Do you feel it too, this thing between us?" Her heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do. Please, Zara, I need to know I am not imagining this." She could have lied. She could have maintained the professional distance that would keep her safe from potential heartbreak. But she had never been good at deception, and the intensity in his gaze demanded honesty. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel it." Relief and something deeper joy perhaps transformed his face. He reached for her flour-dusted hands, holding them gently. "I have been trying to fight this for weeks. I told myself it was inappropriate, that you worked for me, that I should not take advantage of the situation. But I cannot stop thinking about you. I cannot stop wanting to be near you. I cannot imagine this ranch, cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears prickled behind Zara's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her with such raw honesty before. "I feel the same way, but Nathan, what does this mean?" "What happens now? It means I am courting you if you will let me. Properly, the way you deserve. I know the situation is not conventional with you working here, but I promise I will never pressure you or make you feel your job depends on returning my feelings. Your position is secure regardless." "I do return your feelings," she said, and saying the words aloud felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. "I have for weeks now." Nathan's smile was radiant. Then, with careful gentleness, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, tentative, and entirely perfect. Zara forgot about the bread dough, forgot about breakfast that needed preparing, forgot about everything except the feel of his lips on hers and the rightness of being in his arms. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I should let you get back to work. The men will be expecting breakfast soon." "They can wait 5 more minutes," Zara said boldly, and kissed him again. The relationship that developed between them over the following months was unlike anything Zara had experienced before. Nathan courted her with old-fashioned propriety, taking her on walks around the ranch property, reading to her from the books in his study and teaching her to ride horses. They talked for hours about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. He told her about losing his father and the weight of responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders at 24. She told him about watching her parents die, about her brother's abandonment, about the desperation that had driven her to accept any work she could find. They kept their relationship private at first, not wanting to be the subject of ranch gossip, but it proved impossible to hide the way they looked at each other, the way they gravitated toward one another. The ranch hands figured it out quickly, but to Zara's relief, they seemed pleased rather than judgmental. Old Tom told her she was the best thing that ever happened to their boss. Miguel said he had never seen Nathan so happy. Winter arrived in full force, blanketing the ranch in snow and confining everyone to indoor activities during the worst of the storms. Zara spent those long winter evenings in Nathan's study, sitting by the fire while he handled paperwork, and she mended clothes or read. The domesticity of it felt right, as if they had been doing this for years rather than months. On Christmas Eve, Nathan gave her a gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a cookbook she had mentioned wanting weeks ago, a luxury she never would have bought for herself. But there was something else tucked between the pages, a delicate silver ring with a small diamond. "Zara Langford," Nathan said, dropping to one knee in front of the fireplace. "I know we have not been courting long, but I also know I do not want to spend another day without the knowledge that you will be my wife. You have brought light and warmth and purpose to my life. You have made this house a home. Will you marry me?" Through joyful tears, Zara said yes. She said yes 100 times, until Nathan stood and swept her into his arms and kissed her, until they were both dizzy with happiness. They married in early February 1879, in a simple ceremony in the parlor of the ranch house, with the ranch hands as witnesses and a traveling preacher officiating. Zara wore a new dress she had sewn herself from blue silk that Nathan insisted on buying in Santa Fe, and she carried wildflowers that Miguel's wife had somehow kept alive through the winter. It was not a grand society wedding, but it was perfect, filled with love and laughter and genuine happiness. The first night as Nathan's wife, in the main house rather than the cook's cabin, felt both strange and wonderful. They lay in bed together, Zara's head on Nathan's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her, and talked until the early morning hours. They talked about expanding the ranch, about hiring another cook so Zara could focus on managing the household rather than spending all day in the kitchen, about the possibility of children someday. "I want you to have your own kitchen," Nathan said. "Really your own, not just the ranch kitchen. I want you to have the space to cook what you want when you want, without the pressure of feeding a dozen hungry men 3 times a day." "I do not mind feeding them," Zara protested, but Nathan shook his head. "You have earned the freedom to choose. We will hire a cook for the regular meals. The kitchen is yours to use as you wish. Maybe you could start selling baked goods in town, test the waters for that restaurant dream of yours." Zara's heart swelled with love for this man who not only accepted her dreams but actively worked to make them possible. "How did I get so lucky as to find you?" "I was thinking the same thing about you," Nathan murmured, kissing the top of her head. Spring brought new life to the ranch and to Zara's world. Nathan kept his promise, hiring a young man named Charlie to handle the daily cooking for the ranch hands. This freed Zara to experiment with more elaborate recipes, and she began baking pies and cakes that Nathan took to town to sell at the general store. They proved popular, and soon she had standing orders from families throughout Abiquiu and beyond. Summer brought something else: the discovery that Zara was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had always wanted children, but the reality of actually becoming a mother felt overwhelming. Nathan, however, was ecstatic, already making plans for a nursery and insisting that Zara rest more and work less. "I am pregnant, not ill," she protested when he tried to carry her upstairs after dinner one evening. "I can still walk, Nathan." "I know, but I like taking care of you," he said, that smile she loved lighting up his face. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the hot summer and into the cooler autumn months. Zara continued her baking business, though at a slower pace as her belly grew. Nathan doted on her constantly, worrying over every ache and pain, making sure she had everything she needed. The ranch hands treated her like precious cargo, rushing to help with any task that required lifting or reaching. On a cold night in late November, their son was born after a long and difficult labor. Nathan stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement even as Zara screamed and cursed and swore she would never do this again. But when the midwife placed the tiny, red-faced baby in her arms, all the pain faded into insignificance. They named him James, after Nathan's father. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's determined chin. Nathan held his son with a mixture of awe and terror, as if he could not quite believe this perfect little human existed. "We made this," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "We made this amazing person." "We did," Zara agreed, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights, first smiles, first teeth, and first steps. Zara discovered that motherhood came naturally to her, and Nathan proved to be a devoted father despite his busy ranch schedule. He rearranged his work so he could spend mornings with his family, often taking James on rides around the property once the boy was old enough to sit in front of him in the saddle. As James grew into a curious, energetic toddler, Zara found herself thinking again about her restaurant dream. She mentioned it to Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch watching their son chase fireflies in the twilight. "I have been thinking," Nathan said slowly. "There is that empty building on Main Street in Abiquiu, the one that used to be a dry goods store before the owner died. I checked, and it is available for purchase. We could afford it if we are careful with our finances." Zara turned to stare at him. "You mean for the restaurant, why not? Your baked goods sell so well that you can barely keep up with demand, even with cutting back for James. Imagine what you could do with a proper restaurant. You could hire staff to help develop a full menu, really make a name for yourself. But what about James? I cannot run a restaurant and be a mother." "We will figure it out together," Nathan assured her. "Maybe you start small, just serving lunch a few days a week. As James gets older and more independent, you can expand. Or maybe you discover you prefer baking from home and selling to the restaurant. The point is, you have options now. You are not trapped washing dishes for strangers in a saloon anymore. You have a kitchen of your own, a family of your own, and a future of your own making." His words resonated deeply. Zara had come so far from that exhausted, desperate woman scrubbing plates in Maginti's filthy saloon. She had a husband who loved her, a beautiful son, a home, and now the possibility of fulfilling her dreams. It felt like a miracle. Over the next year, Nathan and Zara made plans for the restaurant. They purchased the building and spent months renovating it, turning the dusty, empty space into a charming dining establishment with whitewashed walls, sturdy tables, and a kitchen that made Zara's eyes light up with excitement. Nathan insisted on the best equipment, saying nothing was too good for his wife's restaurant. They named it simply Zara's and opened in the spring of 1882, 3 years after their wedding. The restaurant served lunch Wednesday through Saturday, featuring Zara's home-style cooking and famous pies. She hired 2 local women to help with serving and cleanup, which allowed her to focus on the cooking she loved. Nathan often minded James at the ranch during service hours, bringing him to town afterward so the family could walk home together. The restaurant succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. People came from miles around to taste Zara's cooking, and soon she was written up in the territorial newspaper as one of the finest cooks in New Mexico. But more important than the success was the satisfaction Zara felt in building something of her own, in proving to herself that she was more than circumstances had tried to make her. 2 years after opening the restaurant, Zara gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah. Unlike her brother's dramatic entrance into the world, Sarah arrived quickly and with minimal fuss, as if she knew her mother had a restaurant to run and could not be laid up for too long. James, now 5 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and appointed himself her protector. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper under Nathan's management. The restaurant thrived, becoming a cornerstone of the Abiquiu community. James started school and showed signs of his father's intelligence and his mother's determination. Sarah grew into a happy, laughing baby who charmed everyone she met. On a warm evening in June 1885, Zara and Nathan sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. James and Sarah were playing in the yard under the watchful eye of Miguel's teenage daughter, who often helped with the children. The air smelled of summer grass and possibility. "You ever think about that night at Maginti's?" Nathan asked, reaching for Zara's hand. "Sometimes," she admitted. "It feels like a different lifetime, like that happened to a different person." "In some ways, I suppose it did. You are not that scared, desperate woman anymore." "No," Zara agreed, "but I do not want to forget her completely. She survived impossible circumstances. She kept fighting even when everything seemed hopeless. That strength is part of who I am now." Nathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I am so grateful I walked into that kitchen and saw you. I am grateful for every moment since." "Even when James broke your favorite coffee cup last week," Zara teased. "Even then, though I admit I was less grateful in the immediate aftermath." They laughed together, the easy laughter of people who knew each other completely and loved each other anyway. Sarah let out a delighted shriek as James tickled her, and they both turned to watch their children play. "We did good, did we not?" Zara said softly. "We did better than good. We built something real and lasting. We built a family, a home, a life. I love you, Nathan Naylor." "I love you too, Zara Naylor, today and always." The years continued to pass in a blur of happiness and hard work. James grew into a thoughtful young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Sarah inherited her mother's passion for cooking and spent hours in the restaurant kitchen learning recipes and techniques. The restaurant expanded, adding dinner service and eventually breakfast on weekends. Nathan hired more ranch hands as the operation grew, and the Naylor Ranch became one of the most respected operations in the territory. In 1889, Zara gave birth to twin boys, David and Daniel, completing their family with chaos and laughter. The twins were mischievous from birth, keeping everyone on their toes and testing the patience of their older siblings. But they brought immense joy to the household, and Nathan joked that the ranch would need both of them to keep it running when he eventually retired. The restaurant became more than just a business, it became a gathering place for the community, a spot where families celebrated milestones and strangers became friends over good food. Zara trained several young women in cooking, passing on her skills and giving them opportunities they might not have had otherwise. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she made a point of helping women in difficult circumstances whenever possible. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1894, Nathan surprised Zara with a trip back to Santa Fe, leaving the children in the capable hands of Miguel's family. They stayed at the same hotel where they had stayed during that first trip, ate at the same restaurant where Nathan had first hinted at his deeper feelings, and walked the same streets where they had fallen in love. 15 years, Zara marveled as they strolled through the plaza in the evening light. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. You have any regrets? Nathan asked. Zara stopped walking and turned to face him, taking both of his hands in hers. Not a single one. You gave me more than a job that night in the saloon. You gave me hope and opportunity and love. You gave me a life I never imagined I could have. You earned all of that yourself, Nathan corrected gently. I just opened a door. You walked through it and built everything that came after. We built it together, Zara insisted. That is what matters. We built it together. They kissed there in the plaza. Two people in their 30s who still felt the butterflies of new love, who still chose each other every single day, who still believed in the power of taking chances on strangers who might become everything. The turn of the century brought changes to New Mexico territory. The railroad had finally arrived, connecting small towns like Abiquiu to the wider world. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, though most people still relied on horses. Talk of statehood circulated constantly, and everyone wondered when the territory would finally become a state. Through all the changes, the Naylor Ranch and Zara's restaurant remained constants in the community. James, now 21, took on more responsibility for the ranch operations, showing the same dedication and integrity his father had always demonstrated. Sarah, at 19, talked about opening her own restaurant someday, perhaps in Santa Fe. The twins, barely teenagers, were still deciding what they wanted to do with their lives, though they both loved working on the ranch during summer months. In 1907, on a crisp autumn morning much like the one when they had first met, Zara and Nathan stood together on the porch of the ranch house. They were both in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray, their faces lined with the evidence of years spent working hard and laughing often. 4 children, 2 grandchildren from James and his wife, a successful business and a thriving ranch. They had built an empire from nothing more than hard work, faith, and love. "Do you remember what you told me that night?" Zara asked, leaning against her husband's solid warmth. "When you offered me the job, I said a lot of things that night. You said everyone deserves a chance at something better. I remember. You gave me that chance. You gave me everything." Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "You gave me just as much. Before you, I had a ranch and a business, but I did not have a life. I did not have a reason to come home at the end of the day. You gave me purpose and joy and love. You gave me a family." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ranch wake up around them. Ranch hands headed to the barns. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse kitchen. Horses whinnied in the corrals. This was their world, built from nothing more than a chance encounter and a willingness to take a leap of faith. "I would do it all again," Zara said quietly. "Every hard moment, every struggle, every fear, I would do it all again to end up exactly here, exactly now, exactly with you." "As would I," Nathan agreed. "Though I might try to find you a day or two earlier, spare you some of that time at Maginty's." Zara laughed, the sound carrying on the morning breeze. "No, it all happened exactly as it needed to. I needed to be in that moment, washing those dishes at my absolute lowest point, so I could fully appreciate everything that came after, so I could understand the value of the life we built." They went inside together, hand in hand, ready to face another day of work and family and the beautiful ordinary moments that made up an extraordinary life. The kitchen smelled of coffee and fresh bread, and through the window, Zara could see Sarah teaching her young niece how to knead dough, passing on the skills that had started this whole adventure. This was what love looked like, Zara realized. Not just the grand gestures or the passionate moments, but the daily choice to build something together, to support each other's dreams, to create a life that was better than anything either person could have managed alone. It was showing up day after day, year after year, choosing each other over and over again. In the end, that night at Magenti's saloon had not just changed Zara's circumstances, it had changed her entire destiny. A man had walked into a kitchen, seen a woman washing dishes for strangers, and offered her a kitchen of her own. But more than that, he had offered her a partnership, a family, a love story that would span decades and touch multiple generations. And Zara Langford Naylor, who had once thought herself destined for nothing but hardship and survival, had accepted that offer and built herself a beautiful, full, extraordinary life. She had found love in an unexpected place, built dreams from nothing, and created a legacy that would outlast them both. She had taken the hand extended to her that night and never let go, and that had made all the difference. The sun rose higher in the New Mexico sky, painting the landscape in shades of gold, and in the Naylor Ranch kitchen, life went on in all its messy, beautiful, perfect glory.